So maybe just a bit of background for anybody that doesn't know who George is. Now we sort of in quotes met. So met on LinkedIn, saw his posts. Now just to give everybody a background of where I come from, I sort of come from the delivery side of things. So what George and perhaps Adam, who isn't on this call, would call CSM, so customer success. But I've experienced the exact same problems and we had to fix them. But unfortunately, you weren't around, George, when I started that. That's quite a long time ago. So that's sort of where I come from, and I've been seeing some of your content on LinkedIn, and that same stuff that I then had to talk to marketing about and to sales about and to all the rest of the different departments. It sort of rings a bell like nothing that I've ever seen, and I've never seen anything like it that's so simple and easy to explain. So that's my take on this. But George, do you just want to go into a little bit about your background, where you come from, sort of personal sort of touch?
Yeah, thank you, and really appreciate the kind words, and thank you for following, supporting our content, and sharing it with people. I'm glad that its simplicity has resonated with you. I think it took us a while to get that simplicity. I think it's probably only once you really start to deeply understand something that you can really break it down into simple terms. And it's so interesting that you've experienced the pain that we see and we feel all the way in the CSM delivery side. And I'm starting all the way back at marketing, to people who aren't even ready to buy something from you yet. I've been speaking a lot to Adam and joined forces with him to deal with those who are on the brink of buying something. And now to have you in here as well as someone who's on the delivery side, it would have been great to have Adam here. We're going to have to catch up, all three of us, so you can have really that end-to-end view of things. But look, yeah, as you've already mentioned, I'm the co-founder and co-host of the B2B Playbook. It's where we share our framework for demand generation step by step. Demand generation, I think, is just a rebranding of really good, sustainable B2B marketing that drives good, solid growth. It encompasses really fundamental marketing principles that have been lost in the last 10, 15 years. Before I got into that, I was a sad corporate commercial lawyer, slaving my life away, doing something I hated. Fortunately, did it and did a job that I hated enough to do what I really love doing, which was marketing.
That's
Yeah.
unusual. Most people don't get to the point where they've got enough pain that they then say, right, okay, I'm doing something else.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, well, fortunately, I felt that pain very acutely and very early on. It got me out before before it became too lucrative and too hard to walk away from. So fortunately, that had happened nice and early for me.
Okay, so just before we get into the meat of this, I'm just going to call out the podcast sponsor because that needs to be done. Mechanics, that type of thing. So it's Speculate that supports us. They basically are a bunch of Tony Starks and Pepper Potts that offer fractional resources for companies of any size. So we go from sort of like 250-man organizations all the way up to 10,000. And they offer that in IT security, PMO, and transformation space. So as a service, consulting, and resource augmentation. Now, what makes them stand out? Well, it's quite simple, really. They integrate into teams really quickly, and they make sure that it fits the client's needs, and they get involved, get stuck in, and get it done. As a friend of mine used to say, a safe pair of hands. With that, that's the the pitch done as far as the sponsor's concerned. The other thing is, I know that people have already been asking, George, so it's already going down the line saying it's a tad too early for the UK. Is there a replay? Yes, there is, because it's live. So that's going to happen. What you can see on screen here, I always put these things up, and it's just like something free that if people don't want to ask questions on the recorded call, it's a bot. It stays up for 72 hours, and you can basically talk to George's website and talk to Kev if you want, and it'll answer your questions, but it will point everything in his direction or their direction. And if there is anything that it says that's bad, it's my fault because I configured it.
That's great, Gavin. I'm going to have to get my hands on that thing. I can
Well,
take over for a couple of days while I go on holiday.
that's sort of the idea. So I'm always, sort of from a delivery perspective, it's always filling those gaps, getting those questions answered when it's in sync with the process. And I've found that a lot of these feedback loops, it's to do with, getting that question when the person asks it, and not then having to wait maybe a week to get a special matter expert, which I know you sort of preach about getting your special matter experts to do the stuff when it comes to marketing. Now you can put that type of thing in sort of PDFs, anything that's technical, and it'll come out written if you state that at 11-year-old language. So it's in the language of your customer, because it's that simple that anybody can understand it, even if it's a really technical document, which I find fantastic, because I hate reading 10,000 pages to answer one thing.
Very handy.
Right.
Love it.
Isn't it just? Right. And I suppose just at the beginning, best way to connect here, George.
Yeah. Check me out on LinkedIn, George Coudounaris. You're going to have to link that somewhere because no one can spell
rolling
my
across the
last name.
screen repeatedly. So if anybody can't get the spelling, it is at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah. Otherwise, just Google the B2B Playbook, and we're a founder-led brand, so you're going to see my ugly mug all over it, and there'll be links to my LinkedIn there. So the B2B Playbook, if you can't get a handle on my last name.
Okay. Right, I'm just going to take down the stop screen, remove. So I've got us. Right, I'm just making sure that my screens are working as they should. What are you seeing on screen at the moment? Just
I've got you and me. Yeah, our faces with that title.
I've got the technical stuff sorted out. Yay!
Yeah, looks good.
Finally.
Looks very good.
Right, okay. So, who do you serve is always the second question I asked specifically. So, I've obviously, when I posted this, I've seen it as a lot larger scale than you have. So, you're talking about smaller sort of SMEs. Is that correct? So,
yeah, that's probably fair to say. SMEs is really where we focused our energy. That was more a go-to-market strategy of our own, to be honest. And we will make our way up market eventually, but we knew that the SMEs probably felt the pain that we were solving the most acutely. And really, we're trying to bring those fundamentals, those marketing fundamentals, back to business, so marketing can get their seat back at the table. In the last 10 years, marketing, their role has kind of been reduced to the lead generation machine or the make it pretty department. It hasn't left them any room or time to do any real marketing. And I think marketing is like an amazing profession. I think that they have so many skills and tools to lead that go-to-market strategy, which is the core to what, is a business and how to grow a business. And they should get their seat back at the leadership table. So we've chosen to really focus on, organizations kind of like 20 to 200 small marketing teams, particularly with CMOs, B2B marketers, demand generation managers, showing them how to get back on track, how to create programs that drive real pipeline, real revenue. And yeah, that's really where we're finding we're making the most impact at the moment.
Okay. Now, I'm going to say to that, I've seen it at a lot larger scale, so way above sort of 250. So that the stuff you're talking about seems to be a thing that's, I'm in the tech space, which if you can see by the pre-roll, and that is something we find very difficult to do. We'll talk about things like when people are solution aware or most aware, and none of the rest of the buyer's journey at all, which I find painful because we're literally talking to a tiny speck of the total addressable market. And you just think, sometimes I'd be sat there going, can't we do this just a bit differently? But unfortunately, didn't have what you've got now. So I'm just going to share your framework. Let's just see if I can do that. Okay. Has that worked? Can you see that on the screen?
Not yet. Could still be coming. I am a long way away.
Let's see. Let's see if I'm going to swap it. Share, down to StreamYard. let's do share a screen because I'd like everybody to see this because I think it's a nice way of. There we go. That should have now popped up on screen, I think.
Oh, yep, we've got it now. Great.
There we go. So now, do you just so I always ask, this is about leadership, but I think what you're doing as a business is leadership, in my opinion. So the first thing I always ask is, so how, from your perspective, what are the positive sides of sort of what you're doing at the moment for your business, and also maybe from a leadership perspective yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've chosen to really give away our demand generation framework. We decided to release it step by step, episode by episode. It took us from episode 1 to episode about 110 of the B2B Playbook to share step by step exactly how to implement our demand generation program. And so we've really given the whole thing away. And we effectively did that because we were just so frustrated that there wasn't a lot of good strategic information on what to do and when it came to B2B marketing. Everyone's trying to sell you their own solution, but no one really told you what to do and when. And so then once we pieced it together for ourselves and we battle tested it, we thought, well, there's actually a great framework here that we can really share with people. And we decided that the best and easiest way for us to do that was to release it as a podcast, step by step, take people on the journey with us. And then in a way that has really positioned ourselves as thought leaders. That framework continued to evolve as we continue to share it. Nothing makes you understand what you're doing like when you're trying to teach it to someone else. And it's been incredibly beneficial for us because it's taken people on that journey as well, from being unaware, what demand generation is, to problem aware of, well, what happens in my business if I don't do demand generation properly, to solution aware of, what are the different ways I can implement demand generation in my business? What are the other solutions available? And then once we decided that we wanted to have a product to help people do this the fast way, which is the B2B incubator, then we developed product aware and most aware material as well. And so there's been just enormous benefits for us in sharing the playbook, in sharing it with people step by step, and being recognized as people who are going perhaps a little deeper than some of the superficial content that you tend to see on LinkedIn, or perhaps some of the content that you look at when you are jumping around on Google and it's mostly written by vendors. And so instead it's based on our own experiences. It's based on the stories that we share of implementing these programs. And yeah, we've tried to add as much depth as possible.
Okay, so I'm just going to show people this document just to give people an idea just what's gone into this, aside from obviously the podcast. Should see this. These are just the program notes. If somebody has, so that's a total of 12 weeks, that, if I'm correct. Now, if I read this to start off with, you would have lost me. Well, of course, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I've read this.
That's correct. And there you can see, look, my business partner and a partner in the B2B Playbook is Kevin. This is probably our origin as lawyers coming through, like a bit of type A personality. Everything is very diligently put together, very thoughtfully put together. And the important thing is people can take total action as well. And so this program has taken teams from being largely sales-led to aligning sales and marketing, and then marketing starting to contribute in some cases up to 80% of pipeline. I don't love to talk about the exact amount of pipeline that marketing is driving, because sales and marketing should be working together as one revenue function. But it really helps align the two teams to drive results together. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's something we're very proud of, and just one of many things you get from the program.
Okay. So I suppose that the one thing that I ask next usually is then the downsides of leadership. So I already hear, what did you say? 100 and how many podcasts was it?
I think we've probably recorded 145 now. I think we've released 135 or so. Yeah.
So there must have been some pain in there. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, in those first 6 months, I could look at the download numbers and I could see if I'd been listening to my own podcast or not. The download numbers are so small, but it comes down to how you define success, right? So for us, the podcast was never about the number of listeners.
Right.
We've got that now and all the good things that have come from that. But for us, it was a way to share our framework, to clarify our own ideas, to commit to releasing content based on our own experience, based on our own subject matter expertise every week, no matter what. We haven't really missed a week in a couple of years. And so we've remained extremely organized to do that. But because we defined success in a way that wasn't, how many listeners are we getting, it meant that we didn't give up on it in the first 6 months. It was, is this clarifying our thoughts on demand gen marketing? Do we now have a pillar piece of content that we can share on LinkedIn? Is it giving us a point of view that can get other people to follow us as well? And that's all evolved over time. But there's absolutely some pain in those early stages, figuring it all out for yourself. But, Gavin, we had to practice what we preach as well, right? It's not enough for us to tell everyone else that we work with that, hey, you have to practice demand generation. We had to do it for ourselves. And this was our way of doing that too. And then, of course, the other hard things, like being in the public eye. I was so embarrassed the first time that I shared the podcast on LinkedIn. I didn't want to tell anyone about it. And I think we all suffer from that spotlight effect where you think the whole world is watching you and cares what you do. You know what I realized was no one gives a crap about you at all.
And the sound thing of the crickets in the background. So I can just pause that
in. Exactly. No one gives a crap about you or what you're doing. The good stuff is going to resonate with them. The stuff that doesn't land, fine. It'll just move on and goes into the ether, and you'll just get better the next time. And I suppose probably some of the other drawbacks to being in that sort of thought leadership space is you're always going to get your critics out there. There's always going to be people who have differing opinions too. And sometimes you have to jump in and defend yourself. And then there's also finding the courage to resist being unnecessarily divisive as well. Great marketing technique is picking an enemy, creating a battle line, saying that this is the wrong way to do something and this is the right way to do something. As lawyers, we were trained to be pretty typically measured, and we've remained that way, perhaps at our own expense at times as well. So yeah, plenty of challenges, that's for sure. What about yourself, Gavin? What have you kind of felt is the sort of the main challenge you found in being a leadership position?
Honestly, it was getting special matter experts to write anything that was legible to a human being. Because where I come from in the tech world, we're fantastic at writing stuff that sounds very smart. The only problem is, of course, that's not of any use to somebody that is actually purchasing the product. So, for example, we were selling, 6 to 7, and one case when I was in Germany, it was like 8-figure services. Now that's sort of like buying a house. And the person that is signing the checks is not going to be a technical expert, but they will want to know at the basic level what that is. And I think the problem that we had was I'd literally be sat down with the copywriter saying, no, that's too complicated. That's too boring. They won't read that. That took weeks of my time. I mean, I'd do all my work in the morning because I get up early, and then I'd basically spend my time with the copywriter saying, okay, can you rewrite this, please? That's got to be in English. We've got to think of a better way to stop using the jargon. So I think that's certainly one of the things that I found. And it took that once it finally sunk in that they knew what we wanted and it needed to be in English and you needed to be talking to a person when you were talking about any sort of lead magnets or anything like that, then it finally clicked. And after that, I could sort of wander off and do the job I was meant to be doing, which was delivery. But yeah, but that the odd thing is that obviously I talk to sales, I talk to marketing, and from a delivery perspective, everybody's got their frameworks for their own particular departments, which are fantastic. But there's nothing which gets them sort of right from, the first conversation where sales are selling it some sort of dream, and it's actually a plan of a dream, not just what they've thought of, and then getting them all the way into the actually, right, okay, they've become a customer and then a long-term client. And there's gaps in there. It's like watching the Grand Canyon. You can see it coming. But when you actually then start to fill those by getting the right content out there or getting the right message out there, it's amazing. People would actually say on calls, I was just thinking that. How did you know that? I thought, yes, strike. We got it. that took about 5 years.
That's right. And we like to think of our own framework as something that is, like every other framework, it's a bit of a flywheel, and you go through it again and again. And every time you run through our framework, you get a little bit closer to your customers. You understand what they look like better. You understand what's important to them. You understand more about their buying journey, and you get all of those gaps filled. And so, yeah, I understand why it absolutely takes time to run through that and to have that end-to-end journey built out.
So I suppose I'm talking to the right person now when I ask this question, because what are the upsides of leadership and thought leadership? And we'll because I think people, they don't want to put themselves out there, so they don't even start. But maybe it would help if you can now say, after you've experienced it for like a year and a half, is that right? In 2 years in the wilderness, you can sort of say what are the upsides, so that they do actually, like you said, just keep going. I understand that you said, right, okay, I'm passionate about this. It's what we do, but maybe some milestones, sort of like 2 or 3.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think probably one of the biggest things is when you are having a prospective sales conversation with someone, they have such a good idea as to who you are and what it is that you do. They're almost excited to meet with you. And it is so much easier to convert them into a customer because you've led them on that journey from the beginning. And so they're barely even considering any other vendors because you're the one who has guided them all the way through. So that's people who are pretty much on the brink of being ready to buy. And for a lot of those, because we've been in that game for a year and a half, 2 years, some of those people have been following us for 18 months. They'll tell me, hey, I've been actually listening to you since episode 7 or 8. And it's only now that they're at a company that's big enough that will give them budget to join the program, that their calendar has cleared enough so the time is ready for them to actually go ahead and join us. And then at the point where they reach out and they say, okay, I'm ready, like all the ducks are there in a row. And it's just a matter of making sure that any other people in their organization that they need to get buy-in from, like they get that buy-in from them too, and then we equip them to do that. But because we started this process 18 months, 2 years ago, we've got a constant pipeline of people who are declaring themselves ready. Now that's in contrast of like if 2 years ago decided to just go cold outbound to everyone straight away. And look, absolutely, you got to do what you got to do to get people through the door. But it's so much harder to find that small percentage of the market who is ready to buy right now, who is in market for something that you sell and are willing to buy from you, given that they don't really know you or your brand. And so it's worked incredibly well for us because it creates that familiarity, because we've taken them through those 5 stages of awareness, because we've created that trust, and because they know that it's going to deliver what they're after.
For the non-marketers, could you say what the 5 stages of awareness are?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
look,
I'm not appearing like a dick and
no, for sure.
In your own words.
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's our favorite content framework that very closely maps the buying journey. So the 5 stages of awareness is the 5 stages that someone goes through from being unaware that they even have a problem that your company can help them solve, to being led all the way through to the logical conclusion that you are the perfect solution to help them solve that problem. So you start off by being totally unaware, then you get shifted to problem aware, where you're exploring the different problems that come about from that issue that you're dealing with, to evaluating and looking at different solutions, to then looking at specific products to help you solve that particular issue, to then being led to most aware, where you're really on the brink of buying and you just need that final trigger, you need that final push. And if you talk to your previous customers and you try and map their own buying journey, like what stages did you go through before you ended up becoming a paying customer of ours, you can probably take the different questions that they have and map them to these 5 stages. Is that clear enough, Gavin?
Yes, it is. Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I interrupted you. I just wanted to make sure that this applies to every single business that's out there. It isn't rocket science. It isn't magic. It doesn't matter what platform it is, whether it's Facebook or Google Ads or anything else. As a human beings, I love the fact that you love Robert Cialdini, because he puts this in human terms, and I love the guy. I read this first book, but it's the language that people speak, so it won't make a difference what technical platform we're using. And I think you started off in Facebook, sort of with Facebook ads or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, Meta and Google Ads were probably the primary channels that we use. So we were performance marketers, did a lot of B2C and then B2B as well, but probably had a pretty narrow focus as to what marketing was all about back then. We saw performance marketing as the be all and end all. We thought brand was a little bit of a waste of time. But that
performance marketing is?
Yeah, performance marketing is the idea that you spend $1, you try and make $1.50 back. And so you're typically focused on trying to find those who are ready to buy right now. They normally have much higher intent. And yeah, you're trying to feed that machine and scale it as far as you can. But as we found out, that only scales so far. You can only target and generate revenue from those when they're in market to buy. And if you push that too hard, if you push that too far, you're going to run out of people who are ready to buy, or you're going to push into some really tough competition. And in that situation, it's a case of the biggest fish wins. Like whoever can pay the most for a customer is going to win. Yeah. And that is very, very difficult for new brands.
Yeah, especially for smaller business. The odd thing is I think even the larger businesses run into this problem as well, where they think they've hit a threshold because they've been doing that and just paying. Whereas in fact, if they just went back to the sort of human touch and sort of say, right, okay, we're here, this is what we do, these are the things that we can help you with, and talk about it as you would with anybody if you were talking to a friend to say, right, okay, do you want to go see this film? You do that because you know, like, and trust them. you know what their taste is, and it's similar to yours, or at least, and basically all that the marketing is doing that intentionally. Or correct me there if I've got that wrong.
No, you're right. And people have lost their minds. Like everyone is obsessed with tools and tactics and technology. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to convince someone that, hey, you should trust us. If you trust us and buy from us, it's going to make your life better, not worse. And I think especially in B2B, people forget that, that person who's going to say yes to your product or service, if they say yes, that is a risk to them and their business. Like in B2C,
it's reputation. It's
reputation. Yeah. In B2C, if I
you spend a whole lifetime building in whatever you do. So it's really important to people.
That's exactly right. Like in B2C, if I buy, a denim jacket and some denim jeans and I rock double denim, that decision largely just affects me. My friends might make fun of me a little bit, but life goes on. That's fine.
And the poor people walking down the street.
That's right. But in B2B, if you're a challenger brand, you're a new brand, you're going against the status quo, you're trying to convince someone else in their role that they should pick you instead of the incumbent. If that goes wrong, that is something that will affect that person. It'll affect them achieving their own KPIs, their own everyday job. It's something that could come up in a performance review. It could prevent their whole team from reaching a certain milestone. And then the question is, well, why did you go with this brand that no one knows instead of the incumbent? And the only way to overcome that is trust, right? I have to make you trust me so that you know that I will not let you down. And how do you get people to trust you? Well, our mentality is be helpful, right? Help them now in their everyday jobs, show them that you've helped people like them achieve the things that they need to achieve as well. That comes down to also answering any other objections that they might potentially have, which stems from that fear of, well, what happens if this doesn't go to plan? And it's just like real human life relationships, isn't it, Gavin? That's why I think people really overcomplicate this stuff. Like it's fundamentally about understanding people and building trust with them. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of I may be a bit odd because I'm a third generation business owner. So my granddad started a business before the war, and my dad took it over, and they understood all of this stuff. Obviously nothing to do with digital at all, but they knew the stuff that they were doing translates to this day and age. This sort of screaming blue thing that they had a year or two, user-generated content. Well, that's just people talking to each other and then saying, they're good, go there. We got a good service and we got a good product. That's pretty much what it is. And then that translated onto online as being something really special. No, my granddad was doing that before the war. It's just that he had to do it person to person, or in his particular case, he moved the local agricultural show from about 2 miles down the road. He managed to talk to the officials and convince them it was a better idea to place it right beside his business because there was a field. So he had like 10,000 people once a year walking straight past the business.
Amazing. You're right. It's exactly the same stuff. We just keep finding new ways and terms for describing it. I suppose some of the tactics around, how do we get this information in front of people, like that changes a little bit. But, when people ask, should I use Meta to get in front of my customers? Should I use LinkedIn? Should I use Google Ads? Should I go to trade shows? Should I go to events? It ultimately comes down to, well, have you spoken to your best customers and find out where it is they hang out? Like every organization has a limitation of time, budget, and resources. If you've spoken to your customers, you understand why they're such a great fit for you. If you're able to map out the steps that they need to take, the information they need to get to then win them over as more customers, to take that in front of new customers, well, then it just becomes about, well, let's create that information and get it in front of people. And where are they hanging out? But that's what we've got to ask ourselves.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that people have a real problem with in this day and age, is how do you actually determine that? Question to yourself.
Look, I'll tell you what old George would have done. Old performance marketing George would have said, we've got to test all the different channels. We've got to get budgets across all of them, and we've got to see which ones we get the highest click-through rates and the cheapest reach on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the wrong answer. The right answer is speak to your customers, find out where it is that they're hanging out, look at what budgets and resources you have, and then decide where that money is best spent. If you don't have a big budget, well, then you're probably better off going in organic, real person channels like events to literally get in front of people and do the legwork yourself.
Because right? You're talking directly to that person face to face. There's more trust because they're seeing you as a real person, not online.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That's exactly it. If we have and once that starts working and we have a bit more money, okay, maybe it's time to start investing that in channels where we know that our customers are hanging out. But let's not just put, random things in front of them. We should have already mapped out the information that they need to turn them from a prospect into a customer. And that's what we're going to get in front of them. And so again, old George would have said, oh, let's take a bunch of content that we have and A/B test which one would get the highest click-through rate on. I mean, it's not about that. It's about putting that information that's mapped to the buying journey in front of people and letting them go through that journey themselves. Marketing is very, very good at being able to do that on a one-to-many and a one-to-few basis. And sales can do that on a one-to-one basis too. And if you have that content mapped to that journey, that also equips sales to have conversations that aren't just, hey, buy my stuff now. We can identify where people are at and we can offer them really helpful content.
Yes, you don't have to slap them around the face with a wet fish.
No.
that's what I used to sitting in some conversations where I was listening to the salespeople. I just thought, oh my God. And I could see the person's on their eyes glazing over and thought, okay, you lost them about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's right. And look, maybe that all stems from their go-to-market strategy being, about a bit of a spray and pray tactic, and it puts pressure on sales to close deals as well. Whereas if they have a steady pipeline that's been running for 18 months or so, they know that there are people who are going to be ready. And for those that aren't ready, instead of, hard closing them, we can be helpful. We can be more helpful and keep them on that journey.
So I've got a one from a techie perspective, because that's where I come from. And some of my audience, I know for a fact they're technical and they see sales as sort of like the enemy. Is there any way we can help with that to sort of bridge that gap? Now, this is not the external piece, it's more sort of the internal side of things, because people that are coders, they're very passionate about what they do because they know that the product they've got actually changes lives, and they've built it. So it's a bit like, you've built your own house, you have an opinion about whether the house is good or not. So maybe you could sort of shine some insight on that, sort of how you transmit that message and share it internally so that it gets accepted and that we're on their side too, but we need to be on the customer side as well.
Sorry, Gavin, do you mean between the sales team and the technical person in the organization, like bridging that gap between the two of them?
Yeah.
I mean, look, that's always a tough one as well, isn't it? Is being able to translate between the technical side and then the information that sales has.
Mm,
I think marketing certainly plays a role in helping to enable that information come out of the technical side and then be translated to sales in a way that your customers are going to understand as well. I think marketing can really help bridge that gap, because that's where like a lot of our skill set sits in, is hopefully being able to take that technical expertise and break it down into language that the customers that you're going to be communicating this to understand. And a lot of that is by looking at, well, what language do they already use? Let's mirror that. Let's use that kind of language.
mm.
Am I answering the question in the way that you hoped, Gavin, or if I missed it?
No, no, I think that you've pointed something out that always got me is I would then make sure that we talk to the technical teams and say, okay, that's your expertise. I understand that. But just imagine it's somebody that you don't know, say like your mum or your sister, and they read that. Would they understand anything of that? And they'll of course go, no, no way. And I say, well, that's who you need to be talking to. So this is why we need to change this. And I found that was always took a very long time, because it is a bit like, you built a house, you designed it, you made it, and you love it. But that doesn't mean that somebody else does, because if for them, it's just another house on the street.
Mm.
It was getting to that point. So the marketing piece it's an internal thing as well as an external one. That's what I think, which you've put quite succinctly, but that's sort of the emphasis on it. It's not just outside the organization, it's internally too. And I don't think marketing engages in that way, really. Because I was in delivery and I was sort of like, strung between the two extremes.
It's a tough one. I know it's a tough one, because poor marketing often find it difficult to nail down the technical team to get their expertise and chew their ear off for a bit to make sure that they're drawing out that expertise and then are able to translate it too in a way that the customer cares about. And then on the other side, often, the key things that need to be communicated, you can often gather that by speaking to the customer. Like the customer is going to tell you in their words, not the technical person's words, but their words, what the real use cases were, like what job that helped solve, which is, well, if you're going to be targeting more customers like them, that's the information that you need. I know a lot of marketers, though, also have issues getting access to the customers. And this all comes back to marketing being seen as like the make it pretty department or the lead generation machine. And, like we've lost our seat, at the leadership table. We should be able to have access to customers. We should be able, to take some of that time off the technical person without feeling guilty, because without it, we don't have a business.
Mm, mm. I mean, the thing is, it should be, as far as I'm concerned, really easy these days, because we're on so many Zoom calls that are recorded. You can't not say that you can't just spend the time at 2x speed, 3x speed, whatever you want, to actually listen to a customer conversation. That's what I ended up doing. I said, listen to this. And I just summarize it using AI. And I said, see these questions? Yeah, they got your document, but they didn't understand all of that. So do you see what I mean? And that then clicks, because but I think that takes it's a trust thing as well, isn't it? I think. Because everybody, like you said, I think the marketing department, certainly in sales-led organizations, it's like they're the make it pretty department. They sit at trade shows and hand out brochures, and that's about it. But once they got to the point where they had enough confidence to ask the internal teams and say, okay, all right, this ain't working. Well, we got this. Can you help us? And the technical team started to understand, okay, this is going to make a difference, because the people that then end up landing where we're delivering are not going to ask us 10 million questions. We're not going to be sat on 50 meetings a week. It's going to be more like 10.
That's right.
That then got them. I said, do you want less meetings? And they all went, yeah. I said, okay, then do this.
And
Cool.
look, that's, that's amazing internal marketing. It's finding out what's important to those people and putting it in terms that they understand. So for the technical team, as you said, it's not about, hey, if we do this, we're going to be able to sell better. But hey, if we do this, rather than having 50 additional requests and meetings, a week, you're going to have 10. And then they're going to have more time to do the stuff they want to do. Maybe they can clock off early or whatever it might be. But it's putting it in terms that they understand. And I think, as marketers as well, if we can be more organized and show that this isn't just, like random acts of marketing where we grab some insights here and a bit there and sprinkle a little bit of this and do a little bit of that, but it's part of a consistent long-term plan. And you commit a particular subject matter expert where they know once a month, once every 6 weeks, once every 8 weeks, they're going to be jumping on a Zoom call with you on Tuesday afternoon at 4:30 for 20 minutes to get some insights. Then it's something that they can commit to. They know you're not going to go beyond that period of time. Rather, you get them in the habit of doing that, and then you don't have as many random follow-up requests. So I think making sure that, when you do this, there's an overarching plan to it. It makes it a lot easier for everyone to stick to.
I totally agree. Totally agree. So I suppose that segues quite nicely into the next thing, which obviously you've got a business that does this, but how do you actually build leaders like that? Because I mean, when I've talked to marketing people in the past, they've either been the really outgoing sort, or some of them have been real introverts. But none of them, even of both sorts, oddly enough, they didn't have that confidence. So how do you actually build somebody up to become that leader that they need to be able to actually step up and say to, maybe the C-suite or their boss, hey, and put their hand above the parapet?
As in, how do we build up that marketer to be the one who's saying, hey, I want to make a change in how we're doing things?
Yeah,
I think first of all that marketer needs to educate themselves. It's difficult to convince others if you're not able to explain something yourself in simple terms. And you've got to, again, take into consideration what's important for that business as well. The business is asking you to perform a certain function right now and do what you're doing because they think it's serving a greater purpose. And if you want to change the status quo, you have to show that the existing strategy, the existing tactics that you're doing are not going to meet that business's needs, or there's a better way of doing it. And so you've got to show that there's something, I think there's something wrong about the status quo if you want to make that change. Otherwise, for business leaders, why else would they allow you to do it? What's the point in doing it? And that's why we encourage a lot of the marketers that we speak to. We've put together a pretty extensive business case for demand generation within an organization. And it starts by looking at, okay, if marketing is primarily reduced to just generating leads for sales, let's do an investigation and run calculations to look at what is the quality of the lead that we're generating. How many opportunities are we generating from it? How many of those are closing? How much of sales' time do we need to service those leads and to find the needle in the haystack that's ready to buy from us right now? If you run the numbers and you find, our existing method of lead generation is profitable for the company and it's actually working at a trajectory that meets our goals, I say fantastic. Don't change what you're doing. But if you find that
don't break something that's not broken.
No, honestly, and this comes back to where I say maybe we shoot ourselves in the foot a little bit by not being divisive. But I say if you're doing something that works, keep doing it. But if on the other hand, you run those calculations, you use our tools to see that oh, you know what, actually, so many of the leads that we're paying for are really not turning into good opportunities, and we're actually a really bloated sales team because we're trying to service all these leads. And as a revenue team, the ROI isn't there. We're seriously bloated. Well, then maybe we need to start to look at, well, why is that?
I,
And that's when we. Sorry,
so,
go ahead, Gavin.
so I needed to say, sorry, I'm being a bad listener here, but you said something that I think is really important is when you're talking about bloat, I think it's very typical to add stuff in business, but it's so rare to actually take it away. Don't you think? Because that's sort of where you're going here, isn't it?
It is. It's really, really difficult. And so that's something else that we have in our business case that we give to marketers for demand generation is like, well, if we're going to shift to demand generation, we can't do that all at once as an organization because we've got, 10 sales staff servicing these leads that you're handing them. If all of a sudden that goes to like a tenth of that, what are you going to have? Like 9 sales staff twiddling their thumbs? What are you going to do? So instead, you've got to propose, no, we're going to launch this as a pilot program. We're going to target one product, one segment, and we're going to keep everything the same, for 90% of what we're doing. But we're going to launch this as a pilot. We're going to prove it out, and then we're going to scale it up. Because as you said, it's so hard to take something away once you've gone down that route. And it's very, very difficult to make that change, which is why I think you have to, take it in small increments, do a small pilot project, prove it out, and then roll it out.
So how to eat an elephant in small mouthfuls.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And because that's the other thing, right? Like you're dealing with human beings here. It's much easier said than done to say, well, just fire, the 9 other salespeople. That's a big deal. Someone has to do that. And then if you've got investors, they're going to wonder like, well, you've totally changed tact here. And there's going to be this big gap where you're waiting for this new strategy to kick in. The old one you've completely abandoned. And it's a surefire way to get yourself into trouble and make some enemies, Gavin.
Yes, I noticed. I never made myself particularly popular. I didn't try and get anybody fired, but I did get some people sort of moving on to do something else. Okay, I suppose that we answered the last one is creation, which we've also talked about. So that pretty much wraps it up. But is there anything that I haven't mentioned that you think is important? What question should I be asking?
Oh,
that's such a hard one to answer. Somebody did that to me recently. I thought,
yeah, no, that's a tough one. That's a really, really tough one. I think about maybe a little bit more around like organizational alignment, like getting sales and marketing on the same team. I know like a lot of people say that you should do that and you need to do that, but the process of how to do that and the details is something that needs to be covered more. I don't think we have the time to go really deep into that today, but maybe that's something worth exploring a little more, because I think there's a lot of people out there who say you need sales and marketing alignment, but no one talks about what are the steps to actually go about doing that.
I'd probably even go a step further. I think you need alignment across all the departments. Totally. Because that's what I've been doing for like I did for half a decade. I started off technically designing stuff and then fixing the stuff in delivery. And then I realized it actually didn't have anything to do with all the tech stuff. That works. It had to do with the people and the gaps. And it wasn't just sales, it was marketing, it was operations, it was transition, it was HR, it was legal. And getting them just to say, so, okay, the truck is coming down the road. It is not going to stop. We can't say you're going to stop an 18-wheeler truck. That is just not going to happen. So how far in front of it do we need to be able to either A, get out of the way, get on board, or get the stuff in place that we need to make sure it can pass safely and we get everything done that we need to do to put our expertise or our stuff onto the truck. I think that's that. So I'd probably go to say, right, it's got to go end to end, and everybody understands that. But then again, that is a different discussion for another day. And also, it's just about time for my breakfast.
What's a Gavin breakfast? What are you doing for breakfast?
I drink a what's it called? A oatmeal cappuccino. That's it. That's all I do.
Oh, very good. Very, very what? So no food. You're on the liquids first
No,
thing.
I stick to liquids until lunchtime. I find that
Very good.
it's the older I get, the more I realize food's wonderful. Unfortunately, if I eat a lot of the stuff that I love, I feel like I'm hungover. So I cannot do that anymore. I have to pick my poison, and also when I want to pick that poison. And yourself,
Very
is there anything
good.
you sort of, what do you eat for breakfast?
To be honest, I'm an almond cappuccino first thing in the morning
Right.
off the dairy, and then normally at about 11:30 I'll make myself some scrambled eggs, and go from there. I tend to skip brekkie a lot of the time as well.
You do realize that was a marketing trick as well.
Really?
No kidding, that's where it came from. Breakfast never existed as such. It didn't.
Wow, there you go.
No, the Americans, surprise, surprise. I love them to bits. They've
Marketers,
got so
who
many
needs
things.
them?
Sorry?
Marketers, who needs them? Selling a whole bunch of stuff we don't need.
Well, yeah. When you read some things about marketing, not the good stuff, you just think, "Oh my giddy aunt, that's where that came from." And they literally spent decades ignoring everything that the doctors were saying because in 1940 or 1930 somebody started selling cereals. It was crazy.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Okay, mate. Just to wrap this one up, so thank you very much for taking the time to come and answer my questions. Really appreciate it. Sadly, Adam wasn't here. Everybody that's watching the call, we will sort that out once he's got his back unstuck, and we'll make sure we actually turn up both together, hopefully with George yourself, if you would, if that's possible. And we'll do another one of these, but then we'll have obviously Adam on the call, and he'll be able to sort of go a little more into the sort of sales side of things and what he thinks that process should look like, which George and I obviously don't do. We know sort of where that comes from and how it fits in, but details. Yes,
that's where we like Adam. That's where we like Adam coming
exactly. He does that well. Cool. Well, thanks very much, Matt. It's been a pleasure, and I'll wrap this one up, and I'll see you again on the next one.
Lovely to catch up with you. Thank you so much, Gavin, and enjoy your breakfast. Catch you again soon.
Cheers, Matt.
Cheers. G'day, Gavin. How are you?
I'm all right, Matt.